Every single day, millions of people are deceived by businesses through fake reviews, hidden fees, and misleading ads. And most of them have no idea there's a federal agency whose entire job is to stop it. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on one of the most powerful consumer protection forces in the United States. In this video, you're going to learn exactly what unfair trade practices are, how the Federal Trade Commission works, what tools it has to stop bad actors, what happens to businesses that break the rules, and how all of this actually affects you as a consumer or a business owner. Let's get into it. Section 1. What are unfair trade practices? Let's start with the foundation. An unfair trade practice is basically any business behavior that cheats, misleads, or harms consumers or competitors. Sounds simple enough, right? But the legal definition goes deeper than just lying in an advertisement. Under federal law, a trade practice is considered unfair if it causes or is likely to cause substantial harm to consumers. If consumers cannot reasonably avoid that harm, and if the harm isn't outweighed by benefits to consumers or competition. That three-part test matters a lot, because it means not every annoying business practice is technically illegal. It has to actually hurt people in a meaningful way. Now, deceptive practices are slightly different. Something is deceptive if it involves a representation, omission, or practice that would mislead a reasonable consumer. That could be a false claim in an ad, a product that looks bigger on the packaging than it is, or a company bearing a cancellation fee in tiny print at the bottom of a contract. Here's the thing that surprises most people. A statement doesn't have to be technically false to be deceptive. If it creates a false impression in the mind of a reasonable person, that can be enough to get a company in serious trouble. So what agency is actually out there catching these violations? That's where things get really interesting. Section 2. The Federal Trade Commission. The Federal Trade Commission, or FTC, was created by Congress in 1914. Its original mission was to prevent anti-competitive business practices, basically to stop big companies from crushing smaller competitors. But over the decades, its role expanded significantly to include protecting consumers directly. Today, the FTC is an independent federal agency with 5 commissioners appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate. No more than 3 commissioners can be from the same political party, which is designed to keep the agency balanced and nonpartisan. The FTC's authority comes primarily from the Federal Trade Commission Act, specifically Section 5, which declares unlawful all unfair or deceptive acts or practices in or affecting commerce. That's a broad mandate, and the agency uses it broadly. One key thing to understand is what the FTC cannot do. It generally cannot act on behalf of individual consumers to get them money back. Instead, it goes after patterns of behavior, companies that are systematically deceiving or harming large numbers of people. When the FTC acts, it acts for the public at large. But the question is, how exactly does it take action? Because that's where the real power shows itself. Section 3. How the FTC enforces the law. The FTC has several tools at its disposal, and understanding them helps explain why businesses take FTC investigations so seriously. First, the agency can issue a cease and desist order. This is essentially a formal legal command that tells a company to stop doing something. If a company ignores a cease and desist order, it can face fines of thousands of dollars per day per violation. That adds up fast. Second, the FTC can seek injunctions in federal court. An injunction is a court order that forces a company to stop a specific behavior or sometimes to take specific action. Courts take these seriously, and so do businesses. Third, the FTC can require companies to run corrective advertising. This is one of the more interesting tools. It means that if a company has been misleading consumers, the FTC can force them to spend money on new ads that actually correct the false impressions they created. Imagine being forced to publicly admit your own advertising was wrong. That's a powerful deterrent. The FTC also accepts complaints from consumers and businesses, conducts investigations, and publishes guidelines to help companies understand what is and isn't acceptable. Transparency is part of its strategy, and here's something most people don't know. The FTC maintains a public database of consumer complaints. This data actually helps identify emerging fraud trends before they become massive problems. But enforcement is only part of the story. What about when specific industries or practices need specific rules? That's a whole other layer. Section 4. Specific Rules and Regulations. Beyond its general authority, the FTC has established specific rules targeting particular industries and practices. These rules have teeth, because violating them can lead directly to civil penalties. The telemarketing sales rule, for example, restricts when and how businesses can contact consumers by phone. It's the legal backbone behind the Do Not Call registry, which over 240 million phone numbers are registered with. If a telemarketer calls a number on that list without authorization, they're violating federal law. The FTC also regulates endorsements and testimonials. You've probably seen social media influencers promoting products. The FTC requires that any material connection between an influencer and a brand, meaning any payment, free products, or business relationship, must be clearly disclosed. Hashtags like ad or sponsored aren't just courtesy labels, they're legally required. There are also rules around credit practices, funeral industry pricing, used car sales, and franchise disclosures, among others. The FTC essentially created a framework that says certain industries are high risk enough for consumers that extra transparency is required. And naturally, when companies step out of line in a big way, there are serious consequences. Section 5. Penalties and Remedies. So what actually happens when a company violates FTC rules? The consequences range from manageable to business-destroying, depending on the severity and scale of the violation. Civil penalties can reach up to tens of thousands of dollars per violation. And remember, in a large-scale fraud scheme, each individual deceptive transaction could count as a separate violation. A company running a scam on 1 million consumers could theoretically face billions in penalties. The FTC can also pursue consumer redress, meaning it can go to court to try to recover money for consumers who were harmed. While the FTC doesn't represent individual consumers, it can seek systemic refunds when fraud is widespread. Beyond money, companies may be required to change their business practices entirely, submit to ongoing monitoring, or in extreme cases, face the breakup of anti-competitive business arrangements. The reputational damage often exceeds the financial penalties. Being publicly named in an FTC enforcement action signals to consumers, investors, and partners that something went seriously wrong. For many companies, that signal is more damaging than any fine. Understanding these rules isn't just for lawyers. It's essential knowledge for anyone running a business or spending money in the marketplace. Now you know what unfair trade practices are, how the FTC operates, how it enforces the law, what specific regulations exist, and what penalties businesses face for violations. This is the legal infrastructure that keeps markets honest, and knowing it makes you a smarter consumer and a more responsible business person. If you found this helpful, hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter breakdown. Drop a comment below. What's one unfair business practice you've personally experienced? I read every single one.